When you take a gun apart to clean it, you've got to make a pretty thorough job and make sure that you remove all debris to ensure that the gun functions properly. When it closes, it's going to close against a clean face, it's not going to wear unduly, and it will last you much longer. The jag, which you'll need to put patches in before you clean the gun, you'll pass that down the barrel. A brush, a phosphor bronze brush if you need it, if there are any heavy deposits in the barrel, and a wool mop. The wool mop is used finally to leave a thin smear of oil in the tubes or in the barrels, and never too heavily either, because it will trickle down and run back into the pinholes of the gun. But we repeat these things and go through the process during the course of the demonstration. In the box as well, I've got bits and pieces gathered over the years, a pair of tweezers for those awkward corners, a toothbrush, very useful for cleaning down the ribs and into the checkering. They are proper tools sold for the purpose, but if you run out of anything that you can you buy from the shop, then use an old toothbrush until you can get the proper job. It would do well in the meantime. Sharp edges, such as a toothpick down into the corners of the recesses of a gun. It's been machined accurately to within thousandths of an inch. Dirt can build up, prevent those surfaces from closing properly, causing wear. Don't be embarrassed either to get hold of some cotton buds. They're very useful for cleaning out recesses, applying a thin smear of grease to exactly the place where you want to leave it. A clean cloth will show you exactly how much muck you're removing from your gun, which hopefully there won't be too much of it. A cloth impregnated with oil, which is always useful for finishing off and wiping over the gun. And maybe a slightly oversized brush of a different variety. This one is a standard phosphor bronze brush, well worn. This one is called a Ralph Payne Galway. The initials run nicely with a rocket-propelled grenade, but there's a big difference, obviously. So RPG brush, it's made of brass. It fits the chamber very well if you buy a slightly oversized one, a 10-bore, but even a new 12-bore one will clean the chambers out very well and remove most of the debris before you even need a solvent. But speaking of solvents, you've got a range of products. You have 009, which is a nitro powder solvent, same in a liquid form. You have Young's 303 cleaner. Don't confuse this with a lubricant. A number of guns have come in over the years where this has been used for everything, for woodwork, for cleaning the gun, and for lubricating. If it's used as a lubricant, the water in the mixture will evaporate, leaving behind a heavy, thick deposit. This won't do the action any good. It will just gather dust and dirt, and eventually it will rot woodwork as well. So read the cans very carefully. And in the same way, two products here, excellent products, both from Bisley. One is a gun oil, one is a bore cleaner. Make sure that you use them for their purpose. Use oil very sparingly. Use the bore cleaner just for cleaning the bore, nothing else. And if you need to make life a bit easier, a spray is a good idea to apply gun oil, or you can buy a spray form of cleaner. As I say, it can be 009, it can be any of a range of products available from Philip Morris. Grease is one of the most important things that you can have in your collection of cleaning kit, simply because grease stays where it's put. You can remove it, and in doing so you're removing any tiny metal particles, you're removing dust and grit, and you're putting down a fresh layer which will stay in place and do the job of lubricating moving parts, particularly bearing surfaces, such as the part of a gun which rotates on an axis here. On the Browning gun, you have a hook and a cross pin that requires grease because it will always stay in position and it will help the gun function properly. Now you'll see that I've got a surface here. Keep the family happy, particularly your wife. It will protect any surfaces, including carpets. It will always be there if you want it to. It can contain your brushes, your mop and your jag and the cleaning rods at this end. And this is just one of many, many cleaning kits available in boxes and in rolls. But to get down to cleaning, always have a bin handy, because you're going to spray or put your dirty components into that bin, and then they're safe out of the way and they're not going to contaminate anything else. The cleaning rod's important. Make sure it's a good one. This is a 2-piece rosewood cleaning rod with brass fittings. Very positive. If you look at the end, you've got a screw thread that you can put a jag into to start with. And today I'm going to be using an impregnated patch, one of the Napier kinds, just for speed really. But in fact, what you can use is a patch impregnated with your chosen solvent, and use that to clean the barrels in the first instance. So we just fold the patch, put it onto the jag. You can see the function of the jag now. Okay, pick up our gun and we disassemble it. We'll take off the fore end, make sure it's placed safely away from the other parts, put down the stock and the action, and here we've got the barrels. Now you can see that the ejector rods, or the kickers, whatever you want to call them, are working okay because it's been well looked after, it's been greased. And during the course of cleaning a gun, look at components regularly, just check that there are no cracks appearing. Here on this particular kicker, it's a Browning type gun, that's where cracks can appear. Just in here, if they're spotted soon, they can be replaced. It won't fail when you're in the field or if you're clay shooting. Check the barrels. Any dents that appear in the gun, you know, which do happen from time to time, if they're raised early enough, they can be sorted out, they won't cause a problem. If they're left in the gun, with shot continuously being fired down the barrels, you can get thin spots. So beware of that. Having the barrels pointing down towards your bin, pass the patch down, give it a good turn and twist back into the chambers. I'm going to do this quickly. I wouldn't expect you to do it as quickly as I'm going to this morning, simply because I'd like you to do a thorough job. You can see what's happening. The solvent is really dissolving any muck in that barrel, and it's emerging pretty grimy. Okay, now we go down with a patch, a clean patch, and that clean patch should remove the solvent. Okay, you'll feel the reduction in bore of the choke. You know that you're at the choke end. The patch is picking up any of the excess solvent. Check the barrels, both ends. Look around the chambers, look around the chokes. If you've got multi-chokes in the gun, you may be thinking, why hasn't he removed them? Well, if I remove them during the cleaning process, I'm actually going to force dirt into the threads. So we'll leave the chokes in until the very end. Okay, we check the barrels and I can't see any leading or plastic deposits in there. If I did, I'd take the jag off, I'd replace it with a phosphor bronze brush, and I'd give a jolly good scrub until it became clean again. But then I would have to go through with a clean patch and remove any of the lead or plastic deposits. At the very end of the process, what you need to do is to take a woolen mop, which will have been lightly oiled. I never like to apply too much oil. There's enough oil on this to do a gun 2 or 3 times before I need to oil it again. Then you pass it down, rotating it into the chambers. Push it down the bore a couple of times, rotate it at the choke end. Okay, all the way down, up the other barrel. And you can actually see very, very thin streaks. Hardly any oil there at all, but enough to prevent moisture causing corrosion in the barrels. Check them once again. That's fine, okay. What we need to do now is to wipe over the surfaces of the flats of the chambers. This being the chamber, I'll call these the flats. On a side-by-side gun, the flats of the barrels are in a slightly different position, but we're looking at this over and under as being a gun that's probably typical, owned by many, many people, but the process for cleaning a side-by-side gun would be very, very much the same. Make sure parts move easily, no gritty sounds. If you can, there again, you probably think I'm being fussy, but this will save money in the long term. Cotton bud behind there, right behind the extractors, because that's where dirt gathers, okay? And that dirt's going to stop the extractor mating up flat with the breech face. Now you can see this ejector or extractor leg just running back nicely, not dropping down completely slack. It's a good fit, and it will remain a good fit for as long as you can maintain the gun. And this one, I hasten to add, it's a little bit grubby. I think maybe a stick in there, a cocktail stick. Crikey, he's being fussy, you say, but there's a chunk of dirt coming out there, stuck in behind the head of the extractor leg. And there's another piece there. That's compressed dirt. That's built up over many years, and now that should sit back in there nice and tightly. Clean the rims where the cartridge sits. If the rims get dirty, the cartridge sits proud. If it sits proud, there's more pressure on the breech face. This is where lugs will come through from the action and engage and lock the barrels in place. Clean across there if necessary. Get yourself the cotton bud. Okay, that's grease. It's not dirt, I promise you. Okay, this is the hook that rotates on the cross rod or pin on Browning guns and most side-by-side guns. Give that a good clean. Okay, if it's grease that you put on there, then remove it, just to make sure you remove any dirt with it, and re-grease it. And finally, when that's all clean, then you can run your toothbrush up and down the rib, flick out any dirt. Don't go spraying under here too heavily, because all you're going to do is to encourage dirt. This barrel in that position doesn't pick up too much dirt. Even if it rains, the rain's going to run off, and if the barrel gets warm, it's going to evaporate. But do check it with a brush. Just look underneath there and give it a good look over. You can set this aside now, simply because you're going to finish off with a cloth anyway. You've oiled the barrels. You can apply grease if you need to. I'm not putting any grease on at the moment, but what I need to do is a spot of grease in the hook, some grease on the flats here. You can see where there's been friction here, where the gun is continually being open and closed. This area and this area need a spot of grease, just a touch, and maybe on the bites here where they receive the locking bolt. Next to the fore end, check the function of the fore end. It could be a push rod on a side-by-side gun, or even some over and unders. The push rod will come out here. Look inside, check that the latch is working properly. If you need to, I use a toothpick to indicate. Down inside here, you've got a small bearing area where that hook will engage here with a lump underneath the barrels. That's something that's neglected. People will come in saying they can't get the fore end off, it's very stiff. That's one reason why you need to just check it. This surface here bears against the knuckle of the action. Okay, so that area there needs to be kept clean and greased. So you can see any surfaces I talk about as being bearing surfaces need to be attended to. You can see they get shiny with age, that means they're wearing, but keep them clean, smear of grease, and they won't wear unduly. They'll last you for many, many years. The kickers in here that cause your ejectors to kick the extractor legs there, throw the cartridge out, they need just a touch of grease on the end. And what you'll find is that just inside on Browning guns, you've got a small depression here which receive those parts that merge together when you close the gun, and you'll find that dirt can build up in there. Give those a clean out. The cross pin on the action here needs wiping over. And finally, when you look down inside the action, you'll probably find all sorts of places where you can give a clean out. Well, do so. Any little nooks and crannies, clean them out with maybe a stick. Use a cotton bud. And generally, take a bit of pride in the gun. It's cost you a fair bit of money, or maybe not. But if it hasn't, then it's an asset to you that you can use to buy another gun, or just get even more fun out of using it. The action should be nice and clean. Action face and any other parts other than bearing surfaces can be wiped over with a oily rag. But as I say, don't over oil anything, and don't apply grease where it's not needed, just the bearing surfaces. On the Browning guns, you'll find that parts like latches move. Just check the movement of them. If they're a bit sticky, there may be some dirt in there. Clean them out, give it a once over look. Okay, maybe a spot of grease on that cross pin. And when I say a spot of grease, I mean a very, very small amount. Okay, on the cross pin there, on that knuckle. Okay, and then what you can do is to wipe the gun, and you're happy that the barrels are nice and clean. They've got their coating of oil. Breech ends. Okay, you wipe the action, you've looked at the pinholes where there may be signs of pitting. Okay, attend to that as soon as you can. Make sure you keep it clean. If it's an old gun, it's pitted, you won't do anything about it, but you can prevent it getting worse. And then reassemble the gun. It should fit together very nicely, as it does. Give the underside a wipe. Okay. Make sure that any surface that's going to not be touched for some time is going to resist any corrosion. Fit the fore end back in again. Listen for that nice little click. Okay, it's not too loose, it's quite firm. Even after all these years, this is an old Maruku gun. It still fits nicely. Check the function of opening and closing. You can see where these surfaces bear. If you do need to apply a small amount of grease, then you can do that now. Just a touch on there and a touch on the other side, and you'll actually see when you close the gun that that grease is being moved slightly, and that means that it's doing its job. It's doing its job of lubricating those surfaces. Finally, wipe the metal parts over. Okay, all the way to the end. You've done underneath the fore end, so we've no need to worry about that. As far as multi-chokes are concerned, now is the time to remove them with a choke key if they're fitted, and then clean the threads, re-grease them and refit them. A lot of guns, early guns, were fixed choke like these. It was an easy process of cleaning them. People didn't need to remove the chokes, but it's no great problem with a gun with chokes, because, as I say, remove them at the very end, you've already cleaned them then. You've passed the phosphor bronze brush down, you've removed any lead. If you wish to change them for another choke, fit it now. But if you fit back your old ones, then you've got nice clean chokes and fresh grease. That means they won't be too difficult to remove when you're in the field and using it next time. Safety catch, yes, that works fine. Very, very judicious use of a lubricating oil. Okay, just on the tip of the safety catch, operate it, make sure it works okay. Open up the gun using the top lever, maybe a tiny spot of oil in there, but don't overdo it. Oil has a tendency to migrate. It will run back into the woodwork, causing it to rot and possibly get a bit weak at the head. And don't forget, this is where the recoil is received, and that's where you may look around to see if there are any splits, which there shouldn't be, but if they're going to occur, it will be here in the head of the stock and along here at the beginning of the fore end. So keep a check for those, but don't encourage them by over oiling. Towards the end, you may do things in slightly different order, but you can see the way I've done it is a fairly, controlled way, and it works. Keep on our mat. We don't want the muck going anywhere else. Use the brush, clean the checkering, possibly a different brush. You saw I picked up a different one here. Clean the checkering. Okay, on the fore end, yep, that's nice and clean. Go over it with a clean cloth to remove any dust that you've pulled out from the checkering. And then, something that I haven't got here to show you, there are so many different kinds. You can use a gun stock oil, okay, very, very small amount. Put it on with your fingers, which should be nice and warm, until it disappears. Don't have an excess of it. If there is an excess, wipe it off. Same for the fore end. Go over the fore end. Try not to get it onto the metalwork, and if you do, to check over again. Your wife might be watching you doing this thinking, why doesn't he do the dusting as well? The gun's far more important, I think. Okay, stick to the gun. And when you've finished, admire your nice clean gun, and then consider that you need to put it away. Before you put it away, don't forget you've been dealing with toxic materials. The solvents are certainly toxic. Lead and lead dust is toxic. I don't think I'm being too fussy by saying wash your hands. The purpose of a snap cap, the snap cap can go in, you can close the gun, you can squeeze the trigger, and you can operate the ejectors to see if they function okay. You can also use it for dry firing, just for practicing, and it won't harm the mechanism of the gun. But for those people that think that they need to put these in and fire the gun when they put it away, it's not necessary. It's not necessary because the guns made of modern steels can remain under compression. The springs can remain under compression for many, many years. It won't harm them. So don't worry about that, but do have a pair of snap caps of the right caliber, simply because it will help you to do that dry firing, just the odd practice before you go out in the field. As I said, finally, as far as storage goes, make sure that you have somewhere secure for your gun. It will be obviously police approved where you decide to keep it, and you can either use a chain through the trigger guard attached to the fabric of the house in a position where it's out of sight, or you can use a police approved cabinet. If you do that, it's going to be slightly bulkier, but it will contain everything. It can contain your gun, valuables if you wish, it can contain your cleaning rod, your cleaning kit. Everything can be locked away in one place, which means it's out of the reach of young children, and it's a tidy way of maintaining your kit, possibly under the stairs, somewhere out of sight preferably. But the approved cabinets are very, very cheap when you consider the value of the gun. So there it is. Just make sure that you've got that basic kit. This has been around for many, many years. Things haven't changed too much. I've gathered a few extras, a few tweezers, a few bits and bobs, but there's an array of cleaning kit out there, but the components that I've mentioned to you are the basics. Okay, so happy maintaining.